Good morning. Welcome to the Rise Together Early Childhood Policy Summit. My name is Denise Smith, Executive Director of the Flint Early Childhood Collaborative and Childcare Flint, and I'll be your MC for today. The early years are critical to the development of a healthy, productive, and critically thinking human being. We know that 85% of our brain architecture is determined by age 3. The impact of environment on the structure and functioning of that brain is most critical from conception to age 3. So environments, whether it's school or home, that are highly stressful, tend to disrupt the development of that healthy brain. We know that our experiences create our expectations, which alter our perceptions of self, of the world, and how we're able to operate in it. It is our hope that throughout this day, we're able to provide additional insights as to how each of us can contribute more fully to the development of an early childhood system that is holistic, sustainable, and that ensures the very highest quality experiences for Michigan's youngest children. So to start, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Susan Borrego. Dr. Borrego serves as Chancellor at the University of Michigan-Flint, our host for today. Dr. Borrego is a fierce advocate for underrepresented students, and one thing that impresses me about Dr. Borrego is her commitment to build relationships and partnerships between Flint's communities and the university. As we'll hear today, without strong relationships with each other, it's impossible to make change happen. I applaud Dr. Borrego's perspective and hope you will join me in welcoming her to the stage.
Good morning. Oh, come on. There you go. You guys have to be on in the morning, right? And for those of you who don't know me in the room, people always ask me, do you drink coffee? And I say, no, imagine if I did. And they're like, oh yeah, forget it. So I'm ready to go when I get up in the morning, but I want to thank you for being here today and for joining us at the University of Michigan's inaugural Early Childhood Policy Summit. I have a few comments here, and then I want to say something based on what we just heard. Elected and appointed officials, educators, health professionals, and so many of you who are dedicated to our children, thank you for coming together to explore how our community and our state can inspire further positive progress in early childhood education, health, and other initiatives for all of our Michigan communities. A special thank you, I'm not sure if he's here yet, State Representative Gary Glenn and State Representative Tim Sneller are both expected to be here, and sorry if I can't see you with those lights out there. Another special thank you to our School of Education and Human Services, Dean Barnett, Melissa Richardson, and the rest of the great faculty and staff who worked very hard to make this event a success. The summit is happening at a critical time for our community, for Michigan, and for that matter, early childhood initiatives across our nation. The time for us to come together and explore the possibility of developing and implementing a comprehensive early childhood policy plan to outline goals both short and long term for early childhood care and education in our state. So we're here today on a university campus with an average age of our students of 26 to discuss early childhood education. Does that strike anyone as odd? Probably not in this room. We know the research shows by about grade 3, students are wondering whether or not they'll go to college or if they'll go to college, and whether that's conscious or not, beginning to create that notion of what's possible for themselves. I know how important the topic is to our community. I know that in order to have a college-ready population, we need to do everything in our power to support the pipeline. Early childhood initiatives are critical to the quality of life in communities, and particularly our community. That's why we partnered with local and national entities to open the Cummings Great Expectations Early Childhood Center to address the education, behavioral, and health needs of Flint children as young as 2 months old, and to be a resource hub for parents, families, and other home and center-based child care providers. I want to stop and say for a second, we talk all the time about early childhood. Well, maybe we don't talk about it enough for you all. But we know that those relationships are so critical to whether or not students continue in an educational pathway. And I hear all the time, particularly in underserved communities, they don't aspire to college. They don't know about college. And I'll tell you what, we don't invite them. We don't court them. We don't show the kind of belief in them that we believe they should go. So I wasn't tracked to college, but I'll tell you, when I go read in first grade classrooms in Flint, I ask students, how many of you have heard about University of Michigan-Flint? And the whole classroom raises their hand. How many of you heard about Michigan State? And the whole classroom raises their hand. And I say that to tell you that as first graders, they know about college. But creating that pipeline and the belief in them and the invitation to them that they continue, that's what I think falls away when we think about children. And we most often say somehow it's about them, not that it's about how we're shaping that experience for them. U of M Flint is also ensuring the lessons learned from Cummings can be widely shared. Our faculty are engaged in collecting and analyzing data at the school on what practices best help students' social, emotional, and learning development. This research has potential to inform the best practices in the field of early childhood education. It's another reason I believe U of M Flint is a perfect place to begin this conversation or continue this conversation. One of the main responsibilities of a regional comprehensive university like ours is to be a convener, to bring together professionals from many different fields, different places, and work across boundaries and sectors to facilitate the best possible solutions and outcomes. Just as Cummings is a partnership with the Flint Community Schools and the Genesee Intermediate School District, we are conveners, partnering with wonderful groups to have the greatest impact. And indeed, impact is the goal. Not a grant deliverable or a nice talking point for the local news, but real impact and help to those in the community that need it most. In addition to impact, we have a commitment to Flint that goes beyond the typical ivory tower reputation. This is our home, and we're going to do all we can to create opportunities with and for all of our neighbors, because creating opportunities is important to us and our community. We create opportunities for the over 100 students currently pursuing degrees in early childhood at U of M Flint. 26 master's students, 21 earning their BS in early childhood education, and almost 60 more within the elementary education program, preparing for K-8 Michigan teacher certification. This is a fast-growing and ever-evolving area of study for students. This fall, the enrollment in our School of Education and Human Services was up 70% over the previous year. This means our students are eager to seize the opportunity to join a school with a growing reputation as a leader in the creation and implementation of innovative and education practices. We're also always updating and revising our curriculum to match changes in the field. Just this year, we introduced an inclusive education master's program with a primary goal to move proven research methods into practicing educators' classrooms to create a truly inclusive environment. Additionally, this degree has a part-time 100% online format that gives teachers the convenience to attend while working. And our commitment to engaged learning means our students get hands-on, real-world experience outside the classroom that enables them to hit the ground running once they finish their degree. We're all here today to discuss vital issues as they relate to early childhood education policies, inequity, the return on our investment, collaboration, and leadership practices. The work we'll do together is very important, but today's just the beginning. Today is our call to action. U of M Flint will continue to play a role in this process. This summit is the beginning, a vital first step to advancing early childhood care and education in Michigan. We have the chance to seize the opportunity to build the foundation and plan for early childhood initiatives in our state for years to come. I thank you for being here, and I want to just say, I was talking for a moment with Carolyn. Some of you in the room know that I was an emancipated minor, and so you can imagine those first 15 years up to becoming emancipated. And I'm standing here today as a chancellor because of the web, the village, and I have said from my inauguration on, it took a village. And you sitting in this room today represent the really critical village. When I heard you talk about how much brain development happens, I can only tell you that I was lucky to hit school with teachers who cared about me. Bottom line is, they cared about me. And those teachers, I went back at my 20th reunion to thank them because I really do believe, without making it a big deal, I'm alive because the teachers in my life saw something in me that I didn't know. I begged my grandma to teach me to read. She worked at a factory in Detroit, and at 4, she taught me to read Dr. Seuss. That reading then put me on the path to withstand the kinds of things that were happening around me and be able to keep putting one foot in front of the other with the support of the teachers at every single point in my life. So from a very personal place in my life, I thank you for being here and for being so committed to starting our students on a great trajectory. Have a great day, and go blue.
Thank you, Dr. Borrego. Today, you'll hear from 3 more speakers, each of whom has a particular perspective on what steps we can take to ensure that our state and our communities have strong systems for early childhood development and education. You'll also have the opportunity to participate in 3 breakout sessions. And along the way, it's our hope that you feel inspired. As we all know, an idea without action goes nowhere. And because of us sitting here and that our care about what happens to children in Michigan, all of us share a passion for making sure our state is building strong futures for all. This is our opportunity. And here's the call to action I want you to think about and begin to answer throughout the day. What might it look like for Michigan's leaders to come together and advance early childhood care and education in our state? What would it look like if early childhood systems linked more intentionally to K-12 and then to post-secondary? Is it possible to work together to develop a public agenda that advances children and families? What will you do to make this happen? Now, I'd like to introduce Judy Reidt-Parker from the Ounce of Prevention, who will speak with us this morning about the national policy landscape for early childhood and what it means for Michigan. Judy's career includes opening an EduCare center in Maine, increasing quality program for children in low-income households, and overseeing home visiting for a Head Start agency. She has approached early childhood from every angle and has practical experience from each perspective. I hope you'll join me in welcoming her to the podium.
Okay, Denise. Wow. So PowerPoint for, how do I move the PowerPoint?
Do you want to advance it?
Yeah, just,
He's bringing it.
okay. Sorry about this. This is, but in early childhood, we're not afraid to make ourselves vulnerable. Is this one right
Yeah.
here? Okay.
Okay, no
All right.
worries.
All right, good. Okay, so thank you. As Denise said, I come to this place today, having worked in a lot of different places in early childhood. So I think that's the credibility that I have for being up here. My goal today is to set the tone for the summit. I'm really honored to be here. I'm so impressed by all of the work that's happened for getting EduCare Flint started. I would like to ask, though, I was talking with my colleague Mina Hong, who is here, lives in Michigan, but also works with me at the Ounce. And I can tell who's an early childhood person usually without really knowing their name or having met them, but I would like you to raise your hand if you do not work for or in service of children and families in Michigan. Raise your hand if you do not. Come on, don't be shy. Okay, wonderful, great. So, as I said, after 30 years plus in the field, the rumor is I might have some experience and a particular perspective that can be helpful to others. I tried that argument with my daughter. She's not always all that receptive when I try to advise her on her life, but hopefully you all will be a more receptive audience. We'll see what happens. You'll see that there are two pieces of paper on your table. Everyone has one. The first one says speed talker alert. So I just want you to know that I have a tendency to talk too fast. And if you find that happening, hold up that sign and I will slow down. The other sign that's there is a jargon and acronym alert. Many of you in this room who work in early childhood will recognize the acronyms. That sign is not necessarily for you, but you can use it if you're disturbed by my journey into jargon and acronym. But those of you that are not familiar with the early childhood lexicon, please hold up that sign and I will also pause, make sure that I'm being really clear about those things. So I'm the assistant director of the national policy team at the Ounce of Prevention Fund. So just to give you a little frame of context, since 1982, the Ounce of Prevention Fund has been a leader in the early childhood field, both in Illinois and on the national stage. We do that, we view ourselves as unique and special because we provide a combination of direct service, advocacy, and research. In Illinois, we do that by serving children and families in Head Start, early Head Start, and home visiting. In Chicago, we also provide a network of home visiting programs throughout the state. And we have a state advocacy team that's really dedicated on making sure Illinois' early childhood system is as best as it can be every moment. You'll hear a lot of reference during the course of my talk today about continuous quality improvement. And I think in policy that has the most appropriate fit because you never get it right the first time and you have to always keep going and keep continuing. The national policy team at the Ounce advocates for policies and funding at the federal level, and we provide consultation and technical assistance to state and local early childhood leaders as they try to design and implement their systems to best meet the needs of children and families. And Michigan is in our 20-state network. So you all know about Educare-Flint. In 2000, the Ounce created an early childhood school called Educare Chicago on the south side. In 2003, the Buffett Early Childhood Fund and the Ounce joined forces to help narrow the opportunity gap for more children living in poverty by building more schools and creating a network of early learning champions around the country. Throughout this partnership with the Buffett Early Childhood Fund, Educare grew from one school to a powerful network of now 23. Serving more than 3,800 children across the country, including our newest school here in Flint. Policy and advocacy are essential aspects to the design of the Educare model. Educare partners with colleagues around the state to contribute to the design and implementation of policy related to young children and families. Educare schools help create more champions by displaying what can happen in real classrooms. And we invite federal, state, and local policymakers to Educare schools, again, so they can really see the benefits, meet the families, and understand the power of early care and education. And one of the things, again, that is incredibly important for the Educare model is that these schools are a visual example of what's possible, what's best practice, but there's also a responsibility for every Educare school leader to advocate for policies that benefit all early childhood programs, all children and families in the state. So what do we mean when we talk about early childhood systems? All right, now my early childhood friends, raise your hand if you've seen this image. I have to put my glasses back on. Okay, great. All right. So this is from an organization called the Build Initiative. And they also are on the national stage. They also think about early childhood systems. They also provide state consultation. And Michigan is one of the states in their state network as well. You guys you're very fortunate, but you're also on the ball and really engaged, which is good. Right, so early childhood systems are the conduits for ensuring services to children and families reach target populations. Because children and families are not one-dimensional, there's multiple systems that influence their lives, and they need to be coordinated at the federal, state, and local level. It's not easy work, can't be done on the cheap, but just because something isn't easy doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. Public policy focusing on positive outcomes for children must be guided by standards, shared costs to improve efficiency, and the use of data to inform quality improvements. Children deserve access to quality early learning experiences regardless of where they are, everywhere they are. They deserve access to quality learning experiences. And let's remember, we don't turn our brains off, ever. Even when we're sleeping, there's action. So we need to think about that when we're thinking about the systems that happen for early childhood. And children need continuity in caregivers and services. And so within that system needs to be built on this core set of early learning standards and those values that every child everywhere deserves quality early learning experiences. And every child everywhere deserves continuity. So there's certain aspects to a strong early childhood system that will rise to these values that I just talked about. The first one is, whenever a policy or a system is designed and implemented, is the primary goal to have positive outcomes for children and families? A colleague of mine from New Jersey always says the first thing you have to ask is, will any children be better off? Before you make any decision at all. You need to make sure that administrative and monitoring processes are easily understood. The rules, the policies, the procedures and forms that providers and parents have to complete in order to be paid, in order to be eligible for a program, in order to participate, in order to take advantage of any of the benefits of the system. They need to be simple and not cross purposes. So that image that we had before, this here, you need to make sure that all of the loops, where those loops integrate, you don't have your childcare licensing saying one thing and your health and human services department saying another thing, so that they're contrasting and competing, and it's making hard for people to figure out how to serve families best. You want to make sure that the high-quality services for vulnerable children and families are implemented in ways that promote that continuity of care that I was talking about before, and they serve all children in the same family. You want states to set aside a portion of the funding, federal, state, and local, to support infrastructure investments needed to maintain a standards-based system and provide job-embedded professional learning for teachers and leaders in the early learning field. Okay, so I would hold up a jargon alert sign right now for job-embedded professional learning. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is human beings learn by doing. So no more random acts of training for early childhood, okay? Random acts of kindness, we're all in it. No random acts of training. That is because people learn best when they have context. So teachers deserve being able to have someone provide them with coaching and mentoring, being able to have time and space to be reflective about their practice with their colleagues, being able to have data about their classroom and about individual children so that they can think about those things and make their planning. Same thing for home visitors. Exactly the same thing. They need the time and space to have reflective practice and to think about how to continuously improve their work. And the only way that happens is if it happens with the context of the work that they're doing. States need to explore a range of public payment policies informed by common quality standards. They need to take in particular in childcare, you need to take in the context of the private market. And you need to use cost modeling that's designed to encourage and guide the use of multiple funding streams to support services for a single child or an early childhood program. Over the 30+ years that I have worked in the field, I tried to make sure that my staff were paid well in my Head Start program. When I was a policy advocate only, the number of times I had to take a deep breath when I heard a legislator say, well, we don't want any double dipping. Okay, really? Because you need to understand, there's no such, it's not possible, okay? Because no one funding stream fully covers the cost of the high quality program that children and families deserve. So anybody who dreams about double dipping, put it out of your head, because it's not, it doesn't, that's not a reality. Yes, there needs to be accountability. Yes, there should be cost allocations, and people should definitely prove where that money is going. But providers need to be allowed to braid and blend and layer funding. And states should figure out how to make that as uncomplicated as possible for providers on the ground. This is also, I should have. The other sign I might have needed to put up there for you was a soapbox alert, because I have a few, and this is definitely one of them. So the other thing is that you need both public and private funders to build the capacity of the providers and to also think about how to best attain the scale for quality early learning services. This is one of the bridges that we have yet to figure out how to cross in early childhood, is we are awesome at pilots. Oh my goodness, we're so good at them. We know how to do high quality really, really well. But then how you lift that up and extend that out into a full state or a full federal experience is not something that we're so great at. And some of that is about the policy barriers that we face. Some of that is, as I said, no one funding stream fully funds a good high quality program. Some of that is the fault of those of us in the field. Oh no, we'll take what you can give us. Oh no, I don't need to buy new paint cups from that beautiful Lakeshore catalog. I'll put up with the yogurt cups, okay? Let's not do that anymore, all right? Let's not operate from a space of deficit. Let's operate from a space of abundance, because our children deserve that, and we deserve that. The other thing that I would say about philanthropy is they can only be the spark. It requires federal, state, and local investment of public dollars in order for early childhood to cross the bridge that we need to cross, and for us to really have a full impact and make the huge difference we know we can on the lives of our country's children. In all levels of government, again, federal, state, local, we need to use a comprehensive, non-duplicated data set to guide planning, policy, and continuous quality improvement, as well as fund distribution. So again, back to, here's soapbox alert. So sometimes in, I think, a lot of public sectors, people become accustomed to regularly having a contract with the state government for providing services. And often, the demographics change in a community, and then suddenly they don't understand why they can't fill their slots and they aren't making things work. You need to use data to make sure that the funding is going where the families are and that the funding is supporting what the families need. It can't be based on your gut. It can't be based on a couple of people calling their legislator and saying, this is important to me. It needs to be based on data. So how do we do this? You've got a lot of funding, policy, and regulatory levers that you can use to ensure early childhood systems promote the type of quality early learning experiences that you want. Childcare subsidy policies and procedures have a huge impact. Your licensing regulations for that field. Industry standards for the programs and the workforce. And focus networks and initiatives that sustain those standards all play a role in influencing what happens between the adults and the children in their care. So happy news, new federal funding from the federal omnibus budget, budget. It could be ominous, I don't know, but the omnibus budget. Michigan has the opportunity to improve the access and quality of childcare for families, and they can build upon what was started here in Flint in thinking about using contracts and grants to target particular communities that have issues around access and quality. You can continue to build on the work here in Flint with early on and make sure that your early intervention services are spread across the state and meet the needs of all the children who have special needs. And you can contribute to and continue to improve your maternal and child health systems. So I use this, I have to say, I use this image, I'm very attached to this metaphor for those of us who have worked in early childhood, because my very first job as a childcare director, the father of the family that I was a nanny for when I first got out of college, gave me a toolbox that was awesome. It had everything I needed to not only figure out how to be the childcare director and provide administrative and instructional leadership to my staff, but to also maybe fix that toilet because it kept running. And to also remember that sometimes my maintenance guy was not going to show up and I had to solve a problem. So this also is a metaphor for how tired I got of that, right? And so when we think about our policies, when we think about our programs and our infrastructure and our systems for serving the profession, let's make sure that nobody feels their toolbox is overused, been rated too much, and that they're tired of having to use the same tool over and over again. So, one of the most significant tools for improving early childhood systems is the Childcare Development Block Grant. Now, this is where we're going to wade into the jargon swamp. People call it CCDBG at the federal level, inside the Beltway. Outside the Beltway, for some unknown reason, we call it the Child Development Fund. The CCDF, the Child Care Development Fund. But it's the same money. So this is the federal funding for the state child care subsidy or scholarship programs. It's the largest amount of federal funding that goes directly to states for implementation. The purpose of the funding is to provide subsidies for low-income working parents, and 70% of your base block grant has to go to child care subsidies. 5% can go to administration. The rest is expected to go towards quality. On top of that base amount, sometimes the federal government has discretionary money, and they will target it towards particular populations. So in the omnibus budget right now, in the bill that passed, there's a percentage that's targeted towards infants and toddlers, for example. You have a tremendous opportunity to make significant improvements, not only to how the child care subsidy system is implemented, but of many of the interrelated components, like the professional developments and the standards-based monitoring and quality improvements to impact the lives of working families. So it's incredibly imperative that states maintain the required maintenance of effort and match. Okay, another jargon. If you want to understand what maintenance of effort and match mean in Michigan, Matt Gillard right there will help you. You could call me, but I live in Maine. Talk to Matt. And Michigan has failed to draw down all of their federal money opportunity year after year after year until this year. Don't let that happen again. Keep at it. Continue to make sure that you draw down all of your federal money and you can serve all of the families that are eligible. You have far more families who are eligible than who participate in the program. Part of that is about money. A lot of that is about the process that families have to go through in order to become eligible. Okay, so some of it's about the income limitation. Some of it's about all the paperwork and the proof. You need to think about ways to change that, to make the entry for families who need to go to work and need childcare, to make that less complicated and less time-consuming for them to be able to do it. Lots of states have experimented with that. And in 2016, your Department of Education, your Office of Great Start, commissioned a report with through public sector consultants and said, how can we make our childcare better? And you had 5 recommendations. I have about 5 more for you, but we'll stick with these 5 for now. So the first one is increase financial assistance to families. Right? So be certain to draw down all your federal money, make the application eligibility process less difficult. So one of the ways you can do that is presumptive eligibility. There's a number of states, Georgia, Massachusetts, Colorado, a few others. They do something called presumptive eligibility. So presumptive eligibility means if I'm a parent and I go to a program its mission is to serve my family because I am low income, they have 30 days. They can take me in. I can say, I need this amount of childcare. They can say, let me see your pay stubs, let me pull this stuff together. It looks like you're eligible. 98% eligible. We're gonna get a confirmation from the state. We have 30 days to figure that. They have 30 days to get back to us. During that 30-day time, I can continue to have access to childcare. The provider always will get paid. Even if it turns out I'm not eligible, the provider still gets paid. Because most of the time, these families are eligible. It's incredibly ridiculous, I guess, to not pay attention to the fact that most of these families are eligible, they do need the service, and they needed childcare yesterday. And so asking them to wait that long is irresponsible and puts children and the parent at risk for possibly losing their job. How do they figure out where their child is safe? They can't be focused on their job until they have safe, quality childcare. And so we need to think about that. You need to increase access to quality providers. So you can use grants and contacts to improve access, right? With this, you can target infant toddler populations. You can, in a contract, the other thing that's, from a state administrator perspective, the other thing that's great for a contract is I could put strings in there that says that you have to match up my families that I'm paying for with some comprehensive care that they might need. Maybe you need to make sure that they have a medical and dental home. Maybe you need to make sure that there's good referrals for mental health services, right? So these are all things that you can do with a contract. Now, you don't do a contract and provide the base rate, which is number 1 in my additional lists for Michigan, is your base rate for childcare is terrible. And you have to solve that. It's not okay. This might be connected to why quality providers don't want to take childcare subsidy. Actually, it's definitely connected. There's no might about it. So, what do you do about that? Okay, so in Colorado uses a mapping software to determine where families are and where the childcare is. And where there are what we call in the field childcare deserts, meaning there isn't enough childcare for the need, they use grants to foster people increasing the accessibility in their community. And they tie quality strings to it, which is awesome. And you need to make it easier for providers to improve their programs, right? So when we talked earlier about people getting credit for job-embedded professional learning, this is those of you that aren't in the early childhood field, you're now sort of honorary members because you know what that jargon term means. And you need to use your federal money to support providers to advance in your standards-based system, which here is the quality rating and improvement system is called Great Start. And just like in many other states, there is a threshold for providers. It is very difficult for a provider who is operating singularly on receiving the market rate to go above a particular level because that's where the costs come. In Ohio, they did a cost modeling of this, of the cost of quality and the cost of being at each level of their quality rating system, also known as QRIS, okay, jargon. So they did a study And they discovered that out of the 5 levels that they have, providers started losing money after level 3. So why would you say yes to that? Why would you do that? Until we change how we fund early childhood, until we reckon with the fact that children birth to 5 deserve the same kind of attention of public money as children K through 12, all of the cost of most childcare is burdened by parents. Providers only charge what parents can afford to pay in a community, and parents can only afford to pay so much. And so there's this it's referred to as a quality gap, right? And it is incredibly limiting and debilitating for the early childhood system. So you need to make it easier for providers. You also need to not pay by the hour. How many of you have purchased childcare in the private market? How many of you have said to your provider, so Sue's not going to be here, so I guess I won't pay today? Okay, why would the state do that? Why would a state do that? That is not okay. This is another reason why it prevents families in Michigan from accessing quality early care and education. You need to think about your payment policies, and you need to match them, and maybe even do better than the private rate, the private market rate in some situations. If you want your most vulnerable families to be well served, you use those grants and contracts to make sure they are. And you have a base rate that is actually realistic and at least keeps providers in whatever your threshold is on the quality rating system, if not helping them get higher. You use your quality dollars to help providers get above that and to stay there. Right? So there's tiered reimbursement. Many states, back of an envelope, oh, we have this much money left. Let's do 5% for step 2, 5% for step 3, 5% for step 4 in our quality rating system. No. There are cost modeling tools that you can use that will tell you precisely how much it costs to deliver service in a given community at a particular level of your quality rating scale. That's how you decide what your tiered reimbursement is. Soapbox alert. So then number 4 in this report was to increase access to quality information for parents. And the recommendation is a statewide public awareness campaign about quality childcare. Okay, so yep, that's awesome. That will be really helpful. But if you don't do the other 3 things first, it's really not going to matter. Parents will simply feel guilty because they know about quality early care and education, but they can't find it. So you have to really think about where your priorities are. And lastly, the recommendation is to support the early childhood workforce. Okay, so all early childhood services are basically the business of relationships. Whether you are a home visitor, building a relationship with a parent and supporting the parent in their relationship with their child, whether you are a child care worker and you are providing the base of relationship and supporting the children in your program socially and emotionally as well as cognitively, whether you're a family support worker in Head Start, the entire field, where basically we sell relationships. That's what we do, and build them. We should be experts at them. So we need to think about ways that the workforce is supported. That's connected to multiple pathways, the pipeline that the chancellor referred to, multiple points of entry for people to get credentials and attaching compensation to those credentials. And thinking about the diverse workforce that you have, making sure that those multiple pathways represent so that the adults in the classroom are aligned with the children in the classroom is incredibly important. Okay, so every industry has a set of standards and regulations. Typically, it's the baseline, the minimum set of expectations about service delivery. And for early childhood, though, it's much more than that, because we're not making boxes or cars, we're building brains, right? So here in Michigan, as I said, your standards are called Great Start. And you have to think about how your policies, how your funding how your supports to the workforce make sure that it maintains high levels of quality. Holding our early learning systems and services to high standard is essential for the well-being of our children every moment they are in someone else's care, as well as ensuring a strong foundation for their future and academic success. It's not easy work. Still got to do it. Can't be done on the cheap. You're going to hear me say that a bunch of times. It has to be done. So you need to think about continuity of caregivers. You need to think about caseload ratios for home visitors and family support workers. You need to think about those provider and payment policy rates. And in importing the factors of both structural and process quality. Anyone at any moment hold up that jargon sign, because here we go. Right, so just a quick, for those of you that aren't in the field, structural quality is the size of the room, whether or not the adult has a credential, what's the staff-to-child ratio, what's your group size limit. Process quality is what happens in that classroom. What are the teachers doing? Is there an expectation that there be a research, evidence-based curriculum used, and how is it implemented? What are the opportunities for the children that are happening? That's a very drilled down, simple, but so you need to make sure that your quality rating system, that your standards are thinking about both of those things. Families are ultimately responsible for making informed choices about the specific programs that are most appropriate for their children and for their family situation. Early childhood professionals and others engaged in providing or supporting early childhood services have an ethical obligation to uphold high standards of practice and to hold one another up and help one another rise to those standards. Others within the community, including employers, early childhood program and community organizations who benefit when children and families have access to high quality early childhood programs, also share in the responsibility to improve the quality. So in New Hampshire, the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation has a program for businesses where they have a menu of what they can donate to community early childhood providers to help them with their quality. Some folks in our field define quality by accreditation by a national organization such as the National Association for the Education of Young Children. Those of us in the field will tell you it is a wonderful process. Many good things come from it. Once a program is accredited, they usually don't want to slide back, but the fee for being accredited is very expensive. And so businesses in New Hampshire donate the cost of the fee. So it can be that simple, okay? So what does a well-designed standards-based system look like? First of all, there's quality assurances because you have aligned your program and professional standards, and your quality rating system and your licensing are not in conflict, and perhaps your licensing is your floor, and then the rest goes up. And please remember, anyone who tells you that childcare licensing is enough for quality, it is your minimum standard, it is your baseline. It is not, there is no state where your childcare licensing regulations would be viewed as enough to reach quality. There may be quality happening in a program that doesn't participate in a quality rating system, that only thinks about making sure they meet the licensing, but then they think about something beyond. So it's not that quality doesn't happen, it's that using that as your standard is not sufficient. You want to make sure that there are supply-side interventions that link the standards and participation with program supports like technical assistance and coaching, professional development supports, including training, scholarships for credentials, maybe tax credits. And you want financial supports that include grants, bonuses, tiered reimbursement or differential reimbursement, and wage supplements. You want your demand-side intervention designed to influence the consumer early childhood choices by making sure that there's an easy-to-understand guide for what quality looks like, and public education. But as I said before, that's listed last because there's a lot of other things you need to have in place first. Right, so In order to have a standards-based system, states need well-developed and maintained data collection systems. No more making policy decisions or program decisions with your gut. Use the data. You need a system that's capable of uniquely identifying early childhood programs, practitioners, and the children they serve, so that the collection of non-duplicated data is possible. There's a national organization called the Early Childhood Data Collaborative, and they recommend when states design and maintain their systems, they should try to answer 6 key questions. Are children birth to age 5 on track to succeed when they enter school and beyond? Which children have access to high-quality early care and education programs, and where do they not have access? Is the quality of programs improving? What are the characteristics of effective programs in our state? How prepared is the early care and education workforce to provide effective education and care for children? And what policies and investments lead to a skilled and stable early care and education workforce? So this is a new frontier for states. There's only a few that do it well. The ones that are held up as shining examples are Colorado, Connecticut, Illinois, Maryland, Missouri, Nevada, New York, Oklahoma, and Pennsylvania. So as I referenced before, Colorado uses that software mapping to figure out where there's childcare deserts. In Pennsylvania, they do a reach and risk assessment, which determines the number and location of target populations and whether or not the state investments are adequately reaching the children and families. This is what I was referencing before. You don't get comfortable with where your contracts are and figure everybody's okay. You do an assessment at least every 5 years. Where are the families? Where are the jobs? Where are people living? Who needs childcare? And is the childcare available lining up with where the people are? That's a scary thing to say for some folks in the early childhood field, because you could lose your contract. But maybe you need to think about how your services are designed and adapt. States can also use cost modeling tools, as I referenced before, to ensure the provider payments are true to the actual cost of quality. What's important to remember is that we should never, ever use data to punish teachers or caregivers or programs. That data about programs, data about classrooms, needs to be used to improve them, not to punish anyone. This is about making sure that there's strong feedback loops, right? So you want to have good feedback loops between the policymakers and the state administrators and the people in the field, all data, so that people continue to understand how they can improve how the policy is implemented, how the program is implemented, and to be continually in communication with one another about how to be better. And that really needs to be the mantra in early care and education in all of early childhood programs, always. We're awesome, how can we be better? So, supporting the workforce. Let's talk about compensation first. So according to the Department of Labor, a manicurist earns more than an early childhood provider in Michigan. That's not okay. In a lot of states, parking lot attendants and dog walkers have higher income than those of us that are taking care of children, that are building brains. And let's not forget that most early childhood jobs require credentials of at least 11 college credits in early childhood, or an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree. People are making less than a manicurist, really? Is that a 6-week training program to learn how to do nails and toes? Let's think about that. Not that a good pedicure isn't important, but it's not worthy of more money than what a childcare provider is making. You have to think about your values and your priorities. Now, the national conversation about this problem sometimes gets hijacked by people claiming that the problem is the high cost of care. Okay, erase that idea from your mind now. That's not true. The cost of early care and education in the current market structure, as I referred to before, is a false market because parents are carrying the burden of all of the cost. We've failed to properly invest in early care and education at all 3 levels, community, state, and federal, for decades. The problem is our failure to value children beyond thinking they're cute and adorable and that we love the ones in our families. We need to change how we fund early childhood, and we need to change how we value children and care about the people who are working with children. And we need to recognize that it's an essential support and service, just like public education, and that the profession is worthy and important to the well-being of our nation. So there's some states that have tried to address the compensation issue, right? There's TEACH. There's Louisiana has a progressive set of tax credits where each time a child care provider or a classroom teacher advances their credential, they get an increase in a tax credit, not a reimbursement, tax credit, right? And while these help advance the field, the problem is that these are just supplements. We need to increase the base wages in the field. Right? Now, there have been also efforts, for example, the Head Start standards require that a certain percentage of your teachers have a bachelor's degree. So I was a Head Start director when the regulation first came through, thought it was awesome, used all my professional development and training money that I had to help people advance and get their degrees, and then I couldn't pay them anymore, and they went to work for public schools. Now, in my altruistic moments, that's awesome. There's a first grade teacher who has a good base in early childhood knowledge. In my, how am I gonna fill this position? I was kind of pissed, okay? So we need to think about that. In Oregon, they just have funding for a new preschool program called Preschool Promise, and part of the legislation required that the compensation for your preschool teachers had a parity with the kindergarten teachers in the community where the Preschool Promise was being delivered. So again, really awesome, really great. What about your assistant teacher? How do they get paid? What about your lead teacher? How do they get paid? Now here in Michigan, you have a great public pre-K program that's the envy of many people in the state. Are we confident that everyone's getting paid the appropriate amount to match with their required credential in this state? So the National Association for the Education of Young Children has launched a long-term collaborative effort to address this issue, and it's called Power to the Profession. It's about compensation, it's about credentialing, it's about making sure that we help the nation understand how important this work is. So if you are a member of the Michigan AEYC, please raise your hand. Those of you who are not, pay attention. Keep your hands up, ladies, gentlemen. Those of you who are not, seek them out, ask them about Power to the Profession. It's incredibly important, and it is a national movement we're going to make sure goes. Okay, so because we are building brains in early childhood, we have to continuously aim to improve the quality of early childhood programs and services. So we have to concern ourselves not only with children's development, but also with the health and development of the adults that are caring for these children. The early childhood workforce encompasses a broad spectrum of people. It's composed of individuals with little or no training, and those that have bachelor's and master's degrees. Defining the early care and education workforce can be problematic because we want to make sure that that wide spectrum is well represented. For example, those working in formal regulated settings we call teachers or providers, and those who are taking care of children whose parents work the third shift, or children whose parents have inconsistent schedules. We call them family, friend, and neighbor care providers, or kith and kin. They are no less valuable than the teacher in the classroom because they need to be supported in providing quality early learning experiences for all the children. So how do we do that? So we need to think about competencies and credentials. We need to understand that it's a layered lattice of a different, again, those multiple pathways that we talked about. You can think about supports for informal caregivers. So something as simple as making sure that there's a library play and learn that is advertised and available in the neighborhoods where you know there are people who are accessing family, friend, and neighbor care. And those of you in the field, you know where those providers are. Or it can be even more formal, something like in In Maine, the Educare Central Maine had a program called the Care Quilt, and they would do a once-a-month visit to family, friend, and neighbor care providers, and just bring books, toys, just things, stay for an hour and a half, and be available for that provider, and talk to them about guidance and discipline, talk to them about nutrition and why a child might not want to eat the peas, right? So these things are incredibly important. Moving into the more formal setting, right, you need to have communities of practice, coaching and facilitating of collaborative teaching teams. And in Colorado and Washington, this is something that every state should do. They allow credit in their professional development registry for participating in coaching and mentoring and job-embedded professional learning. So these are all incredibly important things. We need to make sure that the career pathways for people in the formal early childhood workforce is offered to individuals so that there's multiple entry and exit points. And you need to allow for this flexibility for working adults, right? Again, when the chancellor referenced that your average student age here is 26 years old, most of our early childhood workforce, many people have been working in this field for as many years as I have, and they have never believed that they were college material. So figuring out how to make sure that there is a point of entry where they can believe that, where they can understand it, and they're helped with career supports and somebody to navigate that is incredibly, incredibly important. We also need to think about the ethnic and linguistic representation in our field. There are way too many older white women in our field. Okay, way too many, and we need to stop that, because that's not the demographic. Our demographics are changing nationwide, and we need to be thoughtful and supportive and think about that. And we know that if a human being is bilingual, actually their brain is much more flexible. And so we want more bilingualism in our country, and we need to figure out how to do that, because bilingual people are smarter. Let's just say it, right? So I hope I've given you a lot to think about. You may have noticed that I didn't reference Michigan in any of the, well, other than your pre-K, any of the yay. That's not because you don't have nice things, really. That's not why. I can share with you my view from the outside, but I know there's details and nuances that only you know about your state and the early childhood system and services here. From the outside, from my view, your Great Start Readiness Program, as I said, is the envy of a lot of pre-K experts across the country. You have the opportunity to increase your investments in early intervention, and for years you've really been thoughtful about best practice for inclusion and special services. You've got a clear set of recommendations to begin improving your child care system. When you get those 5 done, don't stop. You got more to do, but you're good. And you can take guidance to keep going through the new regulations from CCDBG. And your maternal and child health programs, particularly your home visiting, but all of your maternal and child health programs are also very strong, have a good set of competencies, but are woefully underfunded. That's my view. So overall, Michigan is like most states across the country, right? In some parts, you're awesome. In other parts, there's a lot more work to be done. Take heart. As I'm sure many of you are aware, successful public policy never is a quick and easy thing. It's a long journey, decades upon decades, before we get it right. And even then, we suddenly learn that we need to do something to improve it. When I get discouraged, I remind myself that the kindergarten movement started in the late 1800s. There's still, first of all, very few states mandate school attendance at 5. Most states mandate school attendance at 6 or 7. But pretty much every state has kindergarten. Finally, New Hampshire just got it this year, okay? So it's a long journey. And what I would say to those of you who are not in the field, those of you that are here because you're concerned community members, that you're business leaders, that you are legislators, stay with us. Please don't imagine that when your term ends, you can walk away from early childhood, stay with us, continue to be our champions, continue to ask questions, continue to explore how we can solve making sure that every single child in our country has a high-quality early learning experience, wherever they are. So go forth today with your colleagues, ask difficult questions, ask stupid questions, because they're usually the most difficult, and ask many questions. Stay with us, stay with Michigan families, and we will together figure this out. It's a long journey, but it'll be a worthwhile one. Thank you very much.
Because we're tracking a little early, I've asked Judy to stay at the podium for any questions that you may have. She's provided us incredible insight for what our governance needs to do, but what might be the practical applications for us as direct service providers and advocates. And so I wanted you to have an opportunity to ask questions. We have a mic. Can you help us with that too, please? And one on this side, okay.
I truly enjoyed your speaking points this morning. Thank you so much. And I probably should have held up the speed talking alert, but because I talk fast too, I really didn't recognize it until I was trying. It sounded perfect until I was trying to write it down. So when you were speaking of the policy software mapping, I was only able to acquire 2 of the 5. So if you would be so kind as to.
So the states that do data well, or the states that use software mapping to figure out where childcare deserts are?
To figure out where the childcare deserts are.
So that's
like
mostly
what are the 5 things that they are targeting?
So that's mostly Colorado. The states that do data well, this is what I get for not, Colorado, Illinois, Maryland, Missouri, Pennsylvania, Oklahoma, and Nevada.
She's looking for the policy data systems. What are their recommendations?
So the 5 recommendations, those I can also find very quickly. Are children birth to 5 on track to succeed when they enter school and beyond? Which children have access to high-quality early care and education programs, and which children do not? Is the quality of programs improving? What are the characteristics of effective programs? How prepared is the early care and education workforce to provide effective education? And here's the 6th one. Jeepers. What policies and investments lead to a skilled and stable early care and education workforce? There you go. Okay. Sorry about that.
You didn't expect this.
I didn't, and my nerves were like, ah.
Okay. Hello. My name is Diana McKittrick, and I just wanted to know that do you have any specific incidences of deaf children, indicators of deaf children who learn sign language early on, and if they are on track with their sign vocabulary as equivalent to their hearing peers, and making sure that they're ready to enter kindergarten and have appropriate curriculum to stimulate their language for them. Because for many years they tend to lag behind. And do you have anything specific on that, or are you even looking at anything like that?
So I can't say that I'm a linguistic or inclusion specialist. So what I can say is I think we have not done the deaf community enough service. Many people, it's trendy to sign with hearing children when they're with their babies, right? That's right. So we know that this second language is important, and similar to other languages, I think we have failed deaf children by not making sure that there's an abundance of ASL available throughout their learning experiences. Is really the best that I could say. I think it's It would be true not only for deaf children, but also for bilingual children when they arrive at kindergarten, right? Often there's more that's happening in the brain than what's articulated in the communication to other people.
Right. So what can we do as a deaf community to be able to help them and you to be able to sign and become more successful?
So the first thing I'd say is hold us accountable. And help us understand. I think this comes into the same venue for me as being an ally with any underrepresented group, is make sure that we know how best to support, but also help us know how to do that and what that support looks like.
I would be glad to help.
Awesome.
Hi.
Hi.
So what was the name of the Friend, Family, Neighbor Care program that you have in Maine?
So they lost their funding, but it was called the Care Quilt.
Oh, the Care Quilt.
And if you Google the Kennebec Valley Community Action Program, Care Quilt, you'll probably see some of the evaluation reports connected to that online.
Yeah, I was curious too, but I guess you just kind of answered it, if that was connected to the CCDF or CCDGB funding regulations with
Yes.
It was.
So that's a great question, and I'm going to add on to it,
Okay.
actually, because in the CCDBG regs, one of the things that became different for family, friend, and neighbor care providers who accept subsidy is that there needs to be some kind of a visit, an official visit once a year. That does not have to be a licensing worker, right? Read the regulations carefully. It can be someone who is trusted in the community. It does need to be connected to a formal program, right? There are certain things that you should make sure are present around health and safety, but it doesn't have to be this huge, ridiculous monitoring system, okay? It can be simple. There's a couple of examples for that. Again, in Maine, the requirement is that you can take subsidy for legal, unregulated care if you care for no more than 2 children who are not your own. And you have to have a water safety test. You have to make sure there's no lead in your water, or arsenic, which is also very high in Maine. And you need to do need to do a background check on the people who are regularly in your home. So those things are possible. You don't have to decide that the subsidy regulations have shut out this incredibly important population of caregivers for working families. There's something else I was going to mention about that. Yeah, okay.
So I have a question.
Sorry,
here.
these lights are really...
In a comment, I just want to remind us all that most of our manicurists are females, that this is a woman's issue about a livable wage, as well as child caregivers. So
right on.
sometimes it's referred to as the pink ghetto because we're all there. Now, aside from that, and this may be a question for Matt, Michigan historically has not been drawing down the money that we can, and often that's, for most taxpayers, something we don't understand. So if you could, in a broad way, explain what that is, and maybe Matt can address that later.
So do you want to know the reason why Michigan has not been drawing down, or do you want to know? Okay.
Yeah.
So Matt and I have had a couple of conversations about that, but I'm going to turn it right over to him. As he's getting the mic, what I will say to you is all states need to have a maintenance of effort, which was when they folded all of the early childhood funding into the Child Care Development Block Grant. There was the Aid for Dependent Children, now known as TANF, and some other child care subsidy stuff. They folded that all in, and they wanted states to maintain what effort they were funding originally with that, and then there's a match. They need to rise a certain percentage, and that's based on your federal Medicaid rate.
Yes, and so I'm going to talk more about this in my lunch discussion as well. But I can report now nicely or positively, we are drawing down our maximum federal match now. We really hit a low point back in the fall of 16 where we actually turned back significant federal dollars by not providing our state match. My organization, Michigan's Children, and a number of the other advocates really called out the governor and the legislature for that, and we've seen the investments now made since then to allow us to draw down our full federal match. And now we have some additional federal money coming that I want to talk about at lunch as well. So we're on the right track, but it was a battle to get there.
And you don't have to match the additional money coming. You just have to keep it up with your current maintenance of effort at match.
So we're just going to take one last question because I want to make sure that you have your break.
I've been in education for over 30 years, like you, and so I guess mine is, how do we move past the talking to more action? I'm frustrated. We've had data for a long time. I mean, our state did the high scope study, which I know we need more data and more studies and more current things, but we have policymakers that come that are early childhood friendly, and they smile and they agree with us, and there's a lot of head nodding. I am so grateful for GSRP and what it's done to this state, but I'm frustrated.
Yeah, well, because it's not enough, right? I mean,
It's not
it's serving
enough.
3 and 4-year-olds, birth to 5. This is what you need to think about. And 4-year-olds only, sorry, so 4-year-olds. Okay, so people might not like what I'm just going to say it anyway. So this soapbox alert, okay? If you only invest in a state in programming for 4-year-olds, it is as if your head gasket is broken in your car and you just keep putting oil in it for the very vulnerable kids that you're thinking about. You have to start earlier. So, your pre-K program is awesome. You're not even close to being finished with what needs to happen. And I share your frustration, just kindergarten movement. I don't know what else, I don't know how else to say that. I mean, it's a long, long journey, but refusing to settle is the responsibility of the field. Being open and listening and paying attention to data that tells you lots of good things about what children and family needs is the responsibility of policymakers, and you need to hold them accountable to do that. So.
Great. Thank you, Judy. Let's refuse to settle. I like that. Someone lost a phone, and I will have it. I'm turning the back since the front really isn't giving any indication. So come see me if you've lost a phone, okay? So we're going to take a short break now, and then we'll transition to our morning panels, which will start at 10:15. The 3 panels are located, I'm going to tell you where. In Suite A is a state of crisis, exploring solutions to counter systemic inequity. Suite F is the early childhood education and care, a vital component in community revitalization. And in Suite E is high quality early education earns the greatest return on investment. So Suite A is around the corner for the registration desk, and your E and F are right outside the door here. So we would like for you to complete an evaluation that you'll find in the sessions at the end of that session to inform our panelists and provide feedback to the organizers. And for lunch, if you would return here at 11:45 a.m. Again, I'm going to remind you, I understand lots of you are already doing it, but keep up the good work and use the hashtag MichiganKids for all your social media. Thank you and enjoy your break.